Let's dive into it. So in April, a bunch of great updates in NeuralSeek. So we're going to take you through some slides that are going to highlight the things, and then we're going to dive into the product and show you some of these things. Hopefully, you were able to join us last week because we did a nice webinar on some of the features that we had put out pretty recently, especially when it comes to using mAIstro to do multi-KB joining. And that was a great use case that we had, joining together structured and unstructured databases within a RAG lookup to do really interesting customer conversations. And again, that was one that it keeps on popping up all over the place with customers. A lot of interest there. Almost every other customer I talk to now has use cases like that where they want to fuse unstructured data, coming from websites or PDFs. It's, great and flowery in text with stock and price lookups, other things that come out of structured data so that they can have the best of both worlds. So with that, let's take a look at what we delivered here in the last month. So 1st of April started off with a bit of a bang. A couple big features here. So number one is remove hallucinations. And this one comes up quite a bit. And so as you hopefully know, NeuralSeek, as it's running questions through the engine, takes everything through what we call our semantic scoring engine. So we know where all of the information that's coming from the LLM and sending to a user, whether it's tied back and grounded to a source, right? Because we check all of it. So the remove hallucinations is the logical next step from that. So sort of taking everything that's coming out of the semantic engine and then identifying for the things that we can't find a grounded source for. Checking, is this something very important? Is it a named entity? Is it a proper noun? One of those pieces. And if so, let's remove the whole sentence that it sits in, right? And this is just the first of what is going to be a bigger feature around this, removing hallucinations. But for right now, it works quite well. And I'm going to give you a little demo of this. The next is secrets, right? And secrets are important when it comes to building and scaling inside of mAIstro. So you're definitely going to have connections and configurations like a database or something like that that will have private keys that you might not want a normal authoring user of mAIstro to be able to see, but you want them to be able to consume that. So secrets move those very sensitive things either off to the configuration page, or in the case of NeuralSeek on-prem, you could even define them at the OpenShift layer, right? So they could be passed in dynamically through the whole environment, making it very secure for the folks that want to set and keep those things confidential, but allowing them to dynamically flow up into a mAIstro flow and become a variable that someone can consume inside that platform. We rolled out the first of our pure vector database searches. So Pinecone came out April 1st. And then several new mAIstro flows all around looping, which are important. So April 1st was context loop. And then as we got into later in the month, additional looping. So April 15th, a big release for us. Our governance module debuted. I'm going to show you a lot of that here in the demo. What we call proposals. So basically the ability to do versioning inside of a single instance of NeuralSeek, again, helping to separate from the folks doing configuration from the SMEs doing the testing. So you can have that logical separation between the people that are allowed to see the keys and make the updates from the folks that are testing out and giving their thumbs up or thumbs down. Several new models came in April. The first of it was mAIstro on Watson X. The full model came in. We had a new feature drop called Return Full Docs, and I'll get into that one as well. So basically, some of our use cases and users have gone to the trouble of really tailoring the documents that they've loaded into either Watson Discovery or Elastic, so that they want to not necessarily bring back a passage or a subset of that document. They want the whole document. And so now we allow that for select data sources. We'll be enabling that for all data sources here in a next release. And a bunch of new mAIstro pieces as well. Google Drive connector for both inbound and outbound in a variable loop. Our most recent release last week, the second vector database, so Milvus, came in, time-based filtering and governance, and a bunch of new LLMs. And so behind the scenes, we've restructured how we onboard LLMs into NeuralSeek because it's the number of LLMs that we're seeing released that are of the quality to bring into the platform is rapidly increasing. So in 1 week, we brought in essentially 4 new models, and we don't see that ending anytime soon. All right. I'm going to take a break from the slide deck. We'll get into V next here after I go through some of the demos. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. I've got NeuralSeek up here in a test environment. And the first thing we're going to look at is remove hallucination, right? And so this came about with a bunch of production go lives that we've had recently with some large customers. And, we've definitely come to notice that if folks know that they're playing with a virtual agent or an environment that has Gen AI behind it, they naturally want to try to mess with it, right? Especially internal use cases and even on the customer side. So we've rolled out a lot of features around prompt injection detection and removal, and this remove hallucinations to try to combat a lot of the things that we're seeing live in these environments. And so I came in with a question like this. And for a lot of times, we're seeing folks do things like this, where they put a pretty legitimate question and then throw something in a curveball at the end of it, where essentially it's like a mild prompt injection. Like I want to do something like how hard is DataStage to install? DataStage being a on-prem IBM product, and who was the last emperor of China? Which could be a question that is designed to elicit a weird response. It could be something political. And if you'll notice that the answer that the system came up with only talks about DataStage and didn't mention China at all, right? And that's just what the user sees. And again, we do this in this specific way to try to separate from the user that we had any comprehension of the crazy thing that they asked, right? Because if we give feedback saying, hey, don't ask things that are off topic and stuff like that, that usually eggs people on more. So our standpoint is we can remove, isolate, and completely ignore the bad stuff. And so if you start looking in semantic analysis, how we do this is subtly starting to pop out. So if you look here, the analysis talks a lot about China things, right? And 1908 and 1912. So clearly the LLM wanted to answer that. And so under statistical details here, you can see that we had a bunch of unattributed key terms, right? So none of this stuff was in the trusted documentation we had behind the scenes for this IBM environment. And because of that, we flagged these words. We saw they were part of this sentence, which was the LLM trying to answer that question, and completely removed the sentence, right? So it left a perfectly intact answer to answer the good part of the question, and completely removed the stuff that was OBE or that we didn't want to talk about from a corporate perspective. And the way you set this up is it couldn't be easier. It's a single button. So underneath governance and guardrails, there is this new button here, remove sentences containing hallucinated keywords, turn it on, and it just works. Okay, so let's talk about some of the other pieces. So while we're here in the configuration tab, secrets. And I had mentioned those before. So secrets are set here. And you can see I've got 2 secrets set inside of here. One is a key for my Google Drive that I was using as part of a demo here, and another one was named BQ. And we purposely hide the secret. You can't download this into a change log or anything like that. It is obfuscated. And then inside of mAIstro, you can consume this as if it was any other variable. And then even inside of mAIstro, when you would do a debug, will again hide that drive from you. So you won't be able to see, or the users in mAIstro won't be able to see. So it's sort of end-to-end protection for that secret. In the knowledge bases, again, Pinecone and Milvus came in For right now, for the initial release, we have a limited subset of embedding models that we support. Coming in vNext, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, we're going to have a set of model cards that we're going to enable to bring a wide range of different embedding models into NeuralSeek that you can do almost exactly the same thing as the normal model cards. Load balance across them, choose from different platforms and providers, because most providers these days are either have embedding models that they offer or are rolling them out shortly. And so we'll support all of the majors just like we do with the normal language models. Okay, I'm going to save the context loop for when I jump into mAIstro and kind of show all of those as once. So governance, let's talk about that. So previously inside of NeuralSeek, we had a tab called Analytics, right, which was our initial stab at governance. But we've had a lot of requests for customers to have a more holistic approach to RAG-based governance, right? So RAG-based governance means everything flowing through Seek. What's happening? What's going on? How are things handling it? And this goes down to everything under the covers in NeuralSeek. And so when you land under the governance tab, we've got our executive overview here that shows the big ticket items that, again, in talking with customers, these are the things that people care the most about. So number one, semantic confidence. Overall, how is my environment doing in terms of answering the questions that people are asking it? And for each one of these, min, max, and average. So you can see that I have questions that are doing horrible, 0%. I'm having questions that are great at 100, while my average is about 32%. And with all of the pieces here, we can do time-based filtering, and intent-based filtering is coming shortly. That's part of vNext, and I'll talk to that in a little bit. Knowledge-based confidence, again, a similar metric to semantic confidence. How well is the knowledge-based thinking that's performing to the queries that we're sending down into it? Then prompt injection. Now, we talked about this in the last monthly webinar, but we do have an internal model that is monitoring for prompt injection and then taking action on items there, right? So with the prompt injection, we can either block the entire input if it's over the threshold, or we can selectively remove portions of the input, again, to try to attack those deceptive inputs that can contain both good and harmful inputs in one. And so with this, again, showing 28% on average, meaning most questions coming through the platform are not prompt injection, but definitely some ones that I've tried in this test platform are, and they're intending to, up around 90%. We've got a metric here for how many questions out of the total for the time period hit the HAP filter inside of NeuralSeek and are blocked. And the same thing with PII. Questions containing PII that we've either filtered, blocked, or deleted coming through the platform. Top intents and the ability to filter down into these things gives a great visual of, where are most of my customers talking about. And that kind of flows into the intent analytics. This one should look familiar to you. Essentially, this was identical to what used to be the old analytics tab, brought over into the governance module. System performance is an important one for a lot of folks. So I can take a time-based snapshot here and say, okay, during that time, what was going on both in my instance, right? Maybe I was switching around models, and I could zoom in here and get a better sense of, okay, with the Granite model, here's how it was performing, Llama 2, Llama 3, and get a sense of both the KB performance, the model performance, and the overall answer time. And same thing with the universe, right? So a targeted snapshot of across NeuralSeek, how is everything doing across all models? And it helps you get a sense of, are there models I might want to consider that are doing better than others or worse than others? And I can focus in here and say, okay, I'm pretty happy with mAIstro. It seems like it's performing well on average for the universe. Semantic insights is the next level down in from the overview. Again, getting a little bit more detailed on things like answer sources and how the answers are actually being formed by the system. This being a test instance, that I've been really trying to mess with, this would be much lower than I would expect for a production instance, where the longest source in a lot of the questions coming in is quite small, 63 characters. A lot of times in production, you want this much, much higher, but it gives you a good snapshot into how well are we performing, or how well is my documentation matching the questions that are coming through. Same thing with top source coverage. Generally, you want your top source 70, 80%. Total coverage here is pretty great, on average 100%. Answer length, generally folks are looking for longer answers these days. Standard deviation, again, that one is looking at the spread across all the sources of answers. Generally, higher standard deviation is going to be what you're looking for, a clearly defined winner when it comes to the documentation that was used. And then a fun one, top hallucinated terms. I was doing some demoing here, so Ming Dynasty, nowhere in the documentation here. Kind of fun, easy to pop up, and a great snapshot of, like, if you start seeing things here that you don't recognize or do, it helps you trigger down through and say, hey, why are people asking this? Do we have documentation around it? One thing that's coming in vNext is the ability to do cross-filtering. So come down into these tabs and then figure out, even down to the intent level, how and where these things are coming in. I'll demo that in a second as part of vNext, because in this test environment, we have some of that available. For documentation insights, again, pretty similar as you would expect. For a time period, and coming very soon for a category and an intent, where are my answers coming from, right? What documents are we talking about? Like I've demoed a lot here, talking about Cognos and Infosphere. So I can focus down on these pieces. I can see, well, here's the actual page that's forming a lot of these answers, and click to it and get out to it and understand, is this the content that I expect to be using? Or is this a page that I didn't really want people to get to, and yet somehow we've indexed it and we're starting to get answers from it? So it gives you great visibility into, hey, here is where these things are coming from. Is this what you expect? Is this news to you? User rankings. So if someone comes into the platform and thumbs up or thumbs down an answer, we'll tie that back in with how many times they've ranked back into the intent that they rated. Again, a great snapshot for SMEs and content owners to say, what do people seem like they like or don't like? Then there's configuration insights, which I view as pretty important as part of the overall solution. So basically, as configurations change inside of NeuralSeek, we're going to be logging all of that. And so at an executive level, you can use this configuration insights to see, are we churning as an organization, right? I can come in through and see the versions that are happening, see what changes that are coming in, and say, hey, the team made 15 changes over the course of an hour. What are they doing? Like, why are they churning so much? Find out where things are going, and then ask the right questions in. See where we stabilized, for each one of these pieces. And then we can see proposals, right? So one of the new features that I'll talk about here in a second is called proposals. And proposals, again, are those versions that we can take that are not saved master configuration. They have the ability for folks to try things out. And we can track those proposals over time and see when they flow in and when they become the main versions. And so, I can track these things with titles and good, good metrics around them. I can give a description of what we're trying to do, in addition to the automatically generated difference that we've come up with. Again, and everything from the changes side, we're doing a version compare across each, so we can highlight all the changes that we see. We also let people come in and give a textual description of what they've changed and why. Now, again, rolling back to these is easy for anyone that has configuration tab access. They can come into the change logs, see very similar information about the times, what actually was modified. In this case, this one's a proposal, right, of swap to llama. Again, I can get the descriptions and things that are changed. I could roll forward to this at any time if I wanted to, just by clicking the button, and I'd activate that proposal. Or if I didn't want to deal with it anymore, I could simply come in and delete the proposal, and it'd be wiped out entirely. Now, with the versioning, like every time that you would come in and make an edit to the overall environment, and let me make a minor edit here so we can play with it. I will change the maximum length. Now, when I hit save, it's going to prompt me for information about what I've changed and why. And so I can come in and give a nice title. And give a description why we were seeing abuse, right? And this will then get tracked through the whole platform so that folks can not only see what you changed, but your words about why you changed it as well. So that will flow into governance, that will be here in the change logs, all of this here. Again, making it easy to see what's changed, why, when, and why was it possibly done. Now, as I create proposals, and again, you do that right here inside of configuration. With anything that I do, let's say I come up to the LLMs and I want to say, hey, I'm going to also enable Llama 2 and I'll turn off Llama 3 here. And I'll propose a change and I'll say, enable Llama 2, and then I could save that out. And that's then a proposal for me to use. When I come back into Seek or again on home, when I do like a bulk upload, I can choose any of those proposals that I want to run against dynamically. So I can ask the same question, but I can do this time on Llama 2, and it will happen dynamically behind the scenes without me doing any other configuration. Again, logically separating the person that does the configuration from the people doing the testing, the subject matter experts. And so it makes it really easy to see both sides of these things. And then boom. So again, looks like even Llama 2, we had no problem getting rid of that hallucination. Okay, let's look a little bit on the mAIstro side. So a lot of updates have been coming in to mAIstro, and with that, we've tried to keep up with the example templates. So things like variable loops and all of the looping and breaking, we have great templates that you can use to start out to understand how these things work, the variables that are creating for you automatically. So it's relatively straightforward to say, how can I plug in my use case inside of this? Now, for new connectors, again, Google Drive, both on the save side and on the read side, pretty useful for allowing you to automatically pull documentation, modify it, generate new content, and save it right back into Google Drive. In vNext, we're going to have a few more of these connectors like Cloud Object Storage that'll allow for greater ability to do stuff like that. On the database side, we had BigQuery come in recently. I think that might have been the end of last month, but for database connections, Snowflake is on the horizon as well as Single Store. And again, if you hadn't seen it, a webinar we did last week on fusing DB2 data with unstructured data. And kind of, in that webinar, I showed how to dynamically bring those things back together, fuse them, and answer questions in the RAG pattern. And that is going to be easier to implement here shortly because, again, another one of our upcoming features is going to allow you to create a virtual knowledge base inside of mAIstro, right? So basically the way it's going to work, in mAIstro, you're going to have an ingress point that is going to be virtual knowledge base and an egress point that's virtual knowledge base. Everything in between you can do completely custom. You could do something like, I want to pull a dynamic website or 5 dynamic websites, or make a REST call, or do several database connections, or do multiple knowledge base connections of different types or different indexes, any of those things. And then join the information together however you like using mAIstro, and then queue it up in the format that we described in the connector. Then from there, inside of configuration, you'll be able to come into the knowledge base connector and just select mAIstro. And at that point, it'll work exactly like a normal knowledge base connection, meaning that almost everything in your KB tuning will apply. Like if you give scores and if you give these other pieces, We'll filter, we'll look for date penalties. Inside of the platform, it'll be completely transparent to us that you virtually stitch this knowledge base. We will use it as one. And so that's going to be pretty powerful for doing some really complicated things very quickly. Okay, a couple more things from vNext. So inside of governance, right? Again, we showed you the time-based filter that we have now. It's the ability to snapshot down by a certain time. A few more convenience things are coming in. The first one is going to be the ability to filter by time based on a version of the software, like a configuration. So we'll have inside of our filtering versioning listed, so you can see easily like, hey, for version 14, am I better or worse than I am now? And so the ability to quickly look back, because we'll know what dates and times version 14 was live for. So we'll be able to automatically filter the dates by those. Now, in addition to that, we've got a category and intent-based filtering, right? So in this environment, I've got a few categories set up. So as I start to filter in by these, again, for the time periods, I'll get the intents that are automatically there. And you'll see behind the scenes, I already started filtering. So I've filtered on your data products for these. And I can unfilter, and I can come back and let me make my window here a little bit bigger. Go last month. Great. And I can come in and say, okay, well, maybe I want to check out Watson products and then double filter. So I can get down all the way into an intent. Now, one of the next things we'll do past this is the, again, stitching of these pieces dynamically from other tabs inside of NeuralSeek, right? So you see I did a filter on a category of BI tools, and then Cognos is expensive to implement as the intent. So we'd be able to get here by drilling into this filtering system, or in vNext, you'll also be able to do the same thing from the Curate tab. So you could come into an intent here that you have, and then look at, there'll be a new icon, that'll be take me to governance. And you'll be able to see from this intent, what is the viewpoint for all of the tabs in governance, right? How is the coverage for that intent as a whole? Documentation for that intent singular. Where did that documentation come from? Did it change over time? All of those fun pieces. I'll give a pause there for a second. Any questions on things I've shown so far? Okay, so we'll continue on here a little bit more with some of the example templates for mAIstro. So some of the ones that came out recently are all around looping. And looping is an important part of running things through large language models. And again, that's because all of these language models that we support have a fixed context window, right? At the biggest, right, you've got your Claudes in your GPT-4 turbos that have context windows in the hundreds of thousands of tokens. But even then, you could fit a book, but you can't fit 10 books, right? All the way down to the smallest. I think the smallest model that we have on the platform, the context window is 2,000 tokens. And that would be one of the like Arabic specific models that we have. So in those cases, how do you do something bigger, like a bigger, harder task with a context window that you need to fit in with? Well, the answer is looping, right? And so we have variable-based loops, like this one, where I'm saving off an array into a variable and then looping over the sections of the array. So you can manually set up those arrays however you like, or we can also do it automatically, right? Like if I clear this out here and I hit control flow, there is context loop, right? So with simply doing something like this, context loop and end loop, any text that I have flowing into this node, basically we're going to take that amount of text by tokens, split the context, and then send it on to anything in between. So it'd be something like this. I could drop in my send to LLM, snap these things together. And then at this point, this context loop would take any inbound text let's say I've got a knowledge base that I want to connect in here, right? And hook that up. So my KB search is going to be split by every 1,000 tokens. Every 1,000 tokens, I'm going to send that to the LLM. Usually with an LLM, you're going to want to save off the results and append. So again, that's super easy as well. I could set a variable here, boom, and then in the variable, I'll call it my var, and I want to append, right? So in this case, all of the output of the LLM will just be dynamically appended to my var. And it'll let me go through something really big many times, do lots of LLM calls, save it all off. So again, I could do a massive thing with a very tiny LLM context window. Okay, any questions so far on any of these pieces? All right, I'm going to bring you as a closer through vNext. So I already talked about, I think, almost all of these. So virtual KB for mAIstro. Again, that's the important one where we allow you to define any custom flow across REST connectors, website scrapes, KB lookups into a virtual KB, where essentially you're stitching together all of the documentation you want the RAG pattern to know about, and then you simply connect to it as if it was a KB, and we'll use it inside the normal seek pattern. Model coverage for embeddings, I mentioned that a little bit. So now that we have several pure vector data stores inside the system and several more in roadmap, including KBs for Bedrock and a few additionals, these model cards are going to become important, right? So as you get either a single vector store or using the mAIstro approach, you could do dynamic multiple vector store searches. All of these custom embedding cards will be used to track which embedding model you're going to use for each and then map them through in a very easy way. Again, with some of these things, the possibilities get a little bit endless. For all of these things, I struggle to even think about how I would have to scope hard coding this, right? If I were to take the approach of, I'm going to build this on Python, some of these things would be $100,000 easily to custom code and a couple of minutes of configuration over here. We talked about a little bit when I was showing the governance modules, but essentially cross-tab integration for governance, the ability to go from an intent on curate into the right filtering on the governance tab. Also, we're going to allow the ability to directly export the metrics from governance, either into PDF or externally via a REST call into us to come grab those governance metrics and use them in other platforms. Then lastly, new mAIstro connectors. Again, mAIstro is a big focus area for us. Cloud Object Storage, Single Store, Snowflake, and the big one coming soon, multimodal LLM generation inside of mAIstro. So the ability to take in things and like generate images and imagery using a multimodal model inside of mAIstro. That kind of brings you through what we've been and what we've done in the last month. I think it's quite a bit. Happy to hear any questions you have or thoughts or questions about vNext. Any questions at all? Yep.
I'm looking at the Q&A. I don't see anything outstanding in the Q&A or chat. So.
All right. Well, we'll give it one more minute before we close out. Now is the time if you have any questions. Okay. Well, I think that is it from our side. If you have any questions that come up that you think about later, feel free to hit us up via email or the website. We're always happy to chat with you and answer anything at all. Have a great day. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next month.